After breaking up with her boyfriend, the girl discovered that she was pregnant with one's own child. She secretly gave birth and raised the child. Unexpectedly, the child was born with congenital heart disease, requiring surgery by a top-tier doctor. Thus, she agreed to stage a charade with a man named Gu Liang. At a business-focused cocktail party, Min Hui openly flirted with a married man. Gu Liang's wife spotted this and dumped a glass of red wine over her head. Everyone present watched the scene in shock. Min Hui remained unflustered, showing no remorse. Instead, she calmly remarked that the wine was deserved, then turned to leave. The enraged woman lunged to splash another glass of wine at her. Just then, Min Hui's ex-boyfriend stepped forward to shield her from the attack. Xin Chi, CEO of Bluebird Group and dubbed the unicorn of the investment world, had been observing everything from the shadows. Seeing Min Hui bullied, he couldn't help but intervene. Xin Chi coldly pulled Min Hui away, gently wiping her face. Clearly, he still loved her, yet harbored resentment. Min Hui offered no explanation, only hoping he would forget the past and start anew. But Xin Chi clearly didn't see it that way. Min Hui pulled out her phone to call Gu Liang, signaling the charade was over. As part of the deal, he must also persuade his father to personally perform the surgery on her son. Gu Liang's actions stemmed purely from their status as business rivals. His intent to ruin Min Hui's reputation was utterly despicable. Yet Min Hui cared not, as long as it meant saving her son. Xiao Ming. Xin Chi returned home to shower, his resentment still boiling. He ordered his assistant to investigate Min Hui's background. Learning Min Hui had excelled tremendously after their breakup, rising to become the company's RD director in just 5 years. His heart rate shot up instantly. His assistant, concerned for his health, urged him to get checked at the hospital. After all, he himself had survived multiple heart surgeries. Min Hui searched the hospital for her son when Xin Chi suddenly appeared before her. Not far away, a nurse pushed a stretcher cart toward them. Seeing it about to collide with Xin Chi around the corner, Min Hui feared he'd be injured and shoved him hard against the wall. Xin Chi was speechless, demanding, "What do you think you're doing?" Min Hui, worried his condition might flare up, offered concerned care, but Xin Chi took no offense, instead believing she was putting on a show. Xiao Ming encountered Xin Chi at the hospital and asked him to be his father. Xin Chi was taken aback, telling Xiao Ming one shouldn't claim just anyone as father. Little did he know the boy before him was his own son, whom he had never met. 5 years prior, Xin Chi returned to China to meet his childhood sweetheart, but his girlfriend died in a tragic car accident. On her deathbed, she handed her notebook to Min Hui. Su Tian entrusted a friend to attend the rendezvous on oneself's behalf, asking Xin Chi not to reveal her absence. Xin Chi fell instantly in love with Min Hui upon her arrival. She intended to reveal the truth to him, but Xin Chi suddenly suffered a heart attack. To ensure he lived on, Min Hui resolved to temporarily assume her friend's identity. They shared many beautiful moments together, rowing, shopping, and exploring. Min Hui gradually fell in love with Xin Chi. Yet no secret lasts forever. Xin Chi eventually discovered that Min Hui wasn't Su Tian. He hated Min Hui for deceiving himself and vowed to drive her away. The two parted ways. After their breakup, Min Hui discovered that she was pregnant, but she insisted on carrying the child to term. Min Hui never imagined that Xiao Ming would inherit his father's congenital heart disease. For 4 years, Min Hui worked tirelessly while raising her child. Xiao Ming once asked her why he didn't have a father. Each time, she replied that his father had gone far away. Xiao Ming mistakenly believed his father was dead. At that moment, Xiao Ming's attending physician approached. Hearing the child call in Dad Zhou, Xin Chi assumed he was the boy's father. Perhaps drawn by blood ties, he grew fond of the adorable Xiao Ming. If only he hadn't spotted his ex-girlfriend whom he'd broken up with 5 years prior the next second. Xin Chi watched Min Hui chatting and laughing with the father-son pair. A seemingly happy family of 3 left him with a bitter taste in his mouth. The thought that adorable Xiao Ming was Min Hui's child with another man made Xin Chi seethe with rage. So he deliberately went to Dr. Zhou's office to cause trouble. After observing him, Xin Chi concluded Dr. Zhou was mediocre in every way, nowhere near as accomplished as oneself. He couldn't fathom what his ex-girlfriend had ever seen in him. Dr. Zhou now understood that Xin Chi was deliberately making things difficult. He bluntly stated that he was busy and gave him the boot. Unexpectedly, Min Hui suddenly pushed Xiao Ming into the room. Xin Chi mocked Dr. Zhou for not having time to examine him. Xiao Ming immediately snapped back, saying he didn't like his dad Zhou. Hearing his son's accusatory words, Xin Shi stormed out in anger. Min Hui rushed out to apologize, explaining that children speak without reservation. If he still harbored resentment, he should direct it toward himself, not hurt those close to her. Unexpectedly, Xin Shi misinterpreted her words as defending his husband and child. He confronted Min Hui, demanding if she'd ever felt remorse in the past 5 years. Otherwise, how could she happily marry another man and bear a child this big? Only then did Min Hui realize Xin Shi mistakenly believed Xiao Ming was someone else's son, but she didn't explain she never wanted Xin Shi to know his son existed. Xin Shi resolved to exact brutal revenge on the ex-girlfriend who abandoned him. He ordered his men to halt Min Hui's current project collaboration, to prevent oneself and one's son from starving. Min Hui had no choice but to meet with Bluebird Group. As soon as she entered the company, the receptionist approached her. Min Hui walked into the president's office with a puzzled look. When the big boss turned around, she froze in place. The lovers of the past now seemed like sworn enemies. Min Hui composed herself and pleaded with Xin Shi for 10 minutes to explain the project. Unexpectedly, Xin Shi flatly refused and advised her not to waste her breath. Meanwhile, Gu Liang also sought an opportunity to collaborate with Bluebird. Unaware of Min Hui and Xin Shi's history, he tentatively asked if they knew each other. Xin Shi flatly denied it, adding that shielding her from alcohol last time was merely a casual favor. This remark sparked Gu Liang's scheming mind, prompting him to deliberately smear Min Hui as someone who climbed the ladder through escorting clients. Xin Shi would never partner with a gossipy man. Though Min Hui and Xin Shi's last meeting ended unpleasantly, she refused to give up. She sought Xin Shi out again and again. Despite repeated failures, her chance finally arrived. The chairman arranged a troublesome blind date for Xin Shi. The woman chattered incessantly, driving Xin Shi to the brink of madness. Min Hui seized the moment, stepping in to rescue him on the condition she get 10 minutes alone with him. Xin Shi put on his smooth operator act, successfully ditching the matchmaker. He then offered Min Hui an opening. Come to the company Thursday at 10 a.m., but 11 a.m. that day was also Xiao Ming's surgery time. Min Hui decided to meet Xin Shi first to discuss the project. 10 minutes wouldn't be too late before rushing to the hospital. Min Hui waited half an hour, but he never showed up. Then Dr. Zhou suddenly called the surgery had been moved up, but Xiao Ming insisted on waiting for her before entering the operating room. Without hesitation, Min Hui sprinted toward the hospital. Xiao Ming sat on the hospital bed, his face full of anticipation as he waited for his mom. Watching her little son's figure being wheeled away, Min Hui's heart ached terribly. Meanwhile, Xin Shi was furious that Min Hui had left without permission. Fortunately, Xiao Ming's surgery was ultimately a complete success. Min Hui's heart, which had been in her throat, finally settled, but she never imagined that Xiao Ming's identity would soon be exposed. Min Hui took Xiao Ming to the supermarket to buy groceries. Dr. Zhou suddenly called. Due to poor reception, she stepped outside to take the call. Unexpectedly, Xin Shi was also in the store buying chocolate. After spotting him, Xiao Ming grabbed his toy gun and fired at him. Because Xin Shi had bullied Dr. Zhou before, Xiao Ming wanted revenge. Hearing Xin Shi speak ill of his mother made Xiao Ming even angrier. He raised his toy gun and fired away. The two chased each other around, having a blast. The supermarket had turned into a battlefield. But soon, Xiao Ming ran out of bullets and refused to admit defeat. He stubbornly claimed to be oneself, Superman, and pulled open his shirt to show the CEO his equipment. Seeing the cardiac monitor strapped to his chest, Xin Shi felt an inexplicable pang of sympathy. He quickly picked Xiao Ming up and placed him on the table. Xiao Ming told Xin Shi that all children with heart conditions were chosen by the gods, people with superpowers. Having undergone heart surgery himself, Xin Shi empathized deeply. "We're both chosen by heaven," he said. During their conversation, Xin Shi learned Dr. Zhou wasn't Xiao Ming's father. He finally sensed something was off and began questioning Xiao Ming's identity. So he asked Xiao Ming when his birthday was. Unexpectedly, Min Hui suddenly appeared and interrupted the conversation. Min Hui hurriedly took her son and fled. Xin Shi tried to chase after them but was stopped by the vanished sales clerk. Yet the seed of suspicion had already taken root in his mind. He caught up to the mother and son, grabbing Min Hui to demand answers. Dr. Zhou intervened just in time to separate them. Xin Shi warned him not to meddle, knowing Xin Shi wouldn't let it go. Min Hui deliberately pushed the child's birthday back by 6 months, and solemnly declared Xiao Ming had no relation to him whatsoever. But Xin Shi didn't fully believe it. He immediately had his assistant investigate Xiao Ming's medical records. where he saw the child's true birthday. Then, bearing gifts, he arrived at Xiaoming's kindergarten. Xiaoming was overjoyed to see him. It turned out Xiaoming had been ostracized by his classmates because he wore a heart monitor. His gloomy demeanor reminded Xin of his own childhood. Feeling a shared sense of suffering, Xin made Xiaoming an Iron Man shield. After wearing it, the other children looked up to him with admiration. Xiaoming became very popular. He started calling Xin pretty daddy again. Minhui suddenly received a call from the kindergarten teacher. Rushing over, she found Xin outside the operating room. His assistant explained the child's severe injuries required urgent blood transfusion, but the hospital blood bank was critically low. Time was running out. Xin stated he shared the same blood type as Xiaoming and could donate immediately. But Minhui sharply stopped him. Just then, the kindergarten teacher called to say the child's wound had been treated. Minhui belatedly realized that she'd been deceived by Xin. It turned out that he'd long suspected the truth but pretended ignorance, even having his assistant investigate Xiaoming's birthday. Minhui admitted that Xiaoming was Xin's son. Xin demanded why she hadn't told herself when she gave birth to Xiaoming. Minhui explained that she'd discovered her pregnancy when she was already 3 months along. If she'd told him, he definitely wouldn't have kept the child. Xin couldn't accept this reason. Minhui stated that she never demanded that Xin take responsibility, that he could pretend the child never existed. But the problem was that the child not only existed but stood right before him, alive and well. How could he possibly pretend nothing had happened? The conversation ended bitterly. Xin complained that Minhui had secretly given birth to his child without even asking oneself. If not for his sharp mind, he might never have known his son existed. Xin regretted not noticing earlier how much Xiaoming resembled oneself. Tonight promised to be a sleepless one. While some rejoiced, others grieved. Minhui drank alone in silence, terrified Xin would fight for custody of the child. Unexpectedly, the next day Xin sought a lawyer about custody matters. The lawyer advised him to build a relationship with the child. If the child rejected him outright, things would get complicated. So when Minhui returned home, she was stunned by the scene before her. Xin had dressed up like the child and was playing games with him. To bond with his son, he brazenly moved into his ex-girlfriend's house, acting as if it were his right. Minhui angrily pulled him aside and scolded him, demanding he stop this nonsense. Xin retorted, demanding to know why Xiaoming kept calling everyone daddy, a clear sign of severe fatherly neglect. Minhui, at a loss for words, decided to let her son decide his fate. Unexpectedly, Xiaoming switched sides at the last moment, throwing himself into Xin's arms. He happily declared he wanted to sleep with his handsome daddy tonight. Minhui arranged for Xin to sleep in Xiaoming's little bed, but having grown accustomed to luxury mansions, he couldn't adjust to ordinary living. He tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Minhui also felt increasingly inconvenienced by having an extra man in the house. Dr. Zhou delivered breakfast for mother and son. Minhui was startled and hurriedly signaled Xin to hide. He intended to brush it off, but Minhui threatened to bar him from seeing his son. Fearing Dr. Zhou would discover Xin at home, Minhui quickly urged him to leave, but Xin couldn't help but confront her about her relationship with Dr. Zhou. He wouldn't allow his son to call anyone else dad, so Minhui drafted a cohabitation agreement with him. The most crucial confidentiality clause was never revealing Xiaoming's identity, including the fact they lived together. Xin complained that Minhui's breakfast was inedible. He even disapproved of the bus Xiaoming took to school. Their bickering ended with Minhui backing down, yet this concession led to their home being burglarized. It turned out Xin discovered no hot water while showering at home, causing him to catch a cold the next day. He then made sweeping changes to the house. Not only was Xiaoming's room completely renovated, a coffee machine was installed, and the water heater was upgraded. Minhui was deeply dissatisfied with his unilateral actions. As a fierce argument erupted between them, Xiaoming immediately intervened. Xin hastily explained they were just chatting, not arguing. Xiaoming interjected, other kids' parents hold hands when they talk. Xin and his ex-girlfriend were clearly incompatible, yet they had to pretend to be affectionate in front of their son. But the moment their son left, they immediately pushed each other away with disdain. Xiaoming thought to himself that without him, this family would surely erupt in war. That morning, Minhui was rushing to work and asked Xiaoming to help pack her laptop into her bag. It wasn't until they were preparing for the meeting presentation that they realized they'd grabbed the wrong laptop. Both felt guilty, fearing colleagues would notice something amiss. Fortunately, Min Hui remained composed, delivering the entire presentation without notes. Seeing Min Hui handle the situation so calmly, Xin Shi realized she was truly the kind of person he admired. After the meeting, Min Hui tiptoed over to Xin Shi to swap back her laptop. Unexpectedly, Xin Shi accused her of doing it on purpose and told her never to do such things again. Min Hui retorted, "Stop being so self-absorbed. Not every woman wants to be linked to you." Just then, a colleague approached the office. Later, he verbally insulted Min Hui, calling her a bad woman. Min Hui immediately splashed scalding coffee onto his crotch. Though she vented her anger, it also earned her his lasting resentment. To celebrate the project signing, the company organized a dinner party. Xin Shi, as the client's boss, was also present. The atmosphere grew awkward. Min Hui's best friend, seeking revenge against Xin Shi, deliberately kept pouring drinks on him. Worried about his health, Min Hui urged her friend to stop. Unexpectedly, another clueless colleague joined in. She rushed over to pull the person away from Xin Shi. Oneself, seeing his ex-girlfriend shielding him, Xin Shi was deeply moved. Before long, Min Hui was slumped drunkenly against the railing. Xin Shi, clearly worried, followed her out but stubbornly claimed oneself wouldn't accept one's concern. Min Hui, furious, berated him for being ungrateful. Then, in her drunken state, she blurted out the feelings she'd buried for years. "Back then, when you were lying in the hospital bed and even the doctors didn't know how long you'd last, I was the one who stayed by your side every day, talking to you. I read Su Tian's diary to you, hoping you'd hold on." Min Hui broke down, demanding if Xin Shi's feelings for oneself were genuine. Xin Shi, his mind in turmoil, couldn't face her. He left her with Wu Li and walked away alone. That night, however, he tossed and turned, unable to sleep, Min Hui's words echoing in his mind. The next morning, Min Hui woke up feeling hungover. Though she was a formidable career woman, she didn't want to see Xin Shi, so she had her best friend report the project progress to Xin Shi on behalf of the company. Not seeing Min Hui, Xin Shi deliberately asked some tricky questions. Wu Li couldn't answer them and had to call Min Hui to save the day. As soon as Min Hui arrived, Xin Shi settled down and listened obediently to her report. At the company's welcome team-building event, Ding Feng deliberately flirted with the interns. Unable to stand it, Min Hui stepped in to stop him. Having been repeatedly put in his place by Min Hui, Ding Feng was utterly enraged. In front of everyone, he insulted Min Hui, calling her a promiscuous woman. Furious, Min Hui was about to splash wine on him. The next second, the man was knocked down by Xin Shi. When he saw the CEO delivering the blow, he didn't dare utter a peep. Spotting Xin Shi leaving, Min Hui hurried after her to apologize. Raising their son alone these past 4 years had been incredibly tough for her, especially since Xiao Ming suffered from congenital heart disease. Back home, the two discussed matters concerning their son. Xin Shi asked her why she had chosen to give birth to the child. Still, he was grateful to Min Hui for giving him another family member in this world. They resolved to be the best parents they could be for Xiao Ming. Xin Shi drove his $1 million luxury car to pick up his ex-girlfriend from work. Unexpectedly, his assistant made a sharp turn, sending Min Hui crashing straight into Xin Shi's arms. This scene was captured by her arch-rival. Ding Feng mistakenly believed he had Min Hui's scandalous moment and immediately posted the photos online. The next day, Min Hui arrived at work to find her colleagues staring at her with strange looks. Only her best friend revealed the truth that one had become the subject of scandalous rumors. Min Hui traced the IP address that leaked the photos. She swiftly identified the mastermind behind the scheme. Just then, Xin Shi visited his girlfriend and overheard people gossiping about Min Hui. Furious, he confronted Min Hui and vented his anger. He refused to let Xiao Ming endure others' finger-pointing in the future. Min Hui told him to move out of her place and stay completely away from oneself. She angrily pulled out her phone, demanding Xin Shi see exactly which man she was supposedly entangled with. Though the photos didn't show his face, it was clearly Xin Shi. Min Hui handed the evidence to her boss, demanding Ding Feng issue a public clarification and apology or she'd resign. The boss instead assigned Ding Feng to take over the Blue Bird Group project. Ding Feng sought out Xin Shi. Unaware of her relationship with Min Hui, he subtly disparaged Min Hui throughout their conversation. Xin Shi refused to engage with such a petty man. deliberately leading him to the parking lot to examine the car closely. Only then did Ding Feng realize the person inside was Xin Qi. That afternoon, the entire company received his apology letter to Min Hui. Min Hui was delighted with the outcome and celebrated with Xin Qi over beer. She thanked everyone except Xin Qi. That night, Xiaoming insisted on having both parents tell him a bedtime story. The little boy went to great lengths to bring his parents together. That night, the family of three finally slept together. The next morning, Min Hui woke up startled to find that it was Xin Qi holding her, and immediately pretended to be asleep. Xiaoming kept shaking his mother's body, unable to keep up the act. She finally yawned and slowly woke up. Just as the awkwardness peaked, a knock sounded at the door. Xin Qi rushed to open it, only to find it was oneself standing there. Min Hui quickly pulled Dr. Zhou outside to explain. Worried Min Hui might be swept off her feet by Dr. Zhou, Xin Qi sent his son to scout the situation. The precocious Xiaoming understood his father's intent but remained unmoved, because Dad Zhou was also important to him. Xin Qi paced anxiously at home, waiting for Min Hui to return so he could confront her immediately. He demanded to know what they had discussed during her half-hour outing. He persistently questioned their relationship. Min Hui could only explain they were just friends. Xin Qi retorted angrily, "I live here and I'm getting in your way?" When Dr. Zhou and Min Hui spoke closely, Xin Qi felt intense unease. Later, their meal was thick with tension. Xiaoming completely missed his father's murderous glare, calling Dr. Zhou Dad Zhou repeatedly. Xin Qi rolled his eyes, telling his son not to casually call others dad. Before, when he wasn't around, it didn't matter, but now that he was back, it couldn't continue. Xiaoming looked upset. Dr. Zhou told him to call him whatever he wanted. Immediately, Xiaoming called out, "Dad Zhou." After dinner, Xin Qi confronted Min Hui, telling her not to bring random people into the house. Min Hui shot back, "You're the one who's changed this family." Just as they were about to start yelling again, Xiaoming rushed in and asked Xin Qi if he was going to sleep with him and Min Hui tonight. After Xin Qi left, Min Hui explained to her son it was all an illusion. She and Xin Qi had never slept together and never would. Min Hui's new project needed a sugar daddy. Wu Li encouraged her to approach Xin Qi and suggested a bold plan. Min Hui resisted at first but ultimately sacrificed herself for the project. The moment Xin Qi received his ex-girlfriend's text, he knew something was off. Min Hui not only served him dinner in a maid outfit but also sent Xiaoming away. Xin Qi told her to just say what she needed instead of putting on airs, so she laid out the entire project proposal. Xin Qi secretly rejoiced but couldn't easily commit. After all, he had to be accountable to the company's other shareholders. Min Hui suggested that if she could cut the timeline in half, maybe he'd consider it. Xin Qi agreed, but immediately ordered Min Hui to change her clothes. If she didn't change, they might end up having a second child. Min Hui began a long stretch of overtime work. Upon learning this, Dr. Zhou came to the house to win Xiaoming's favor. After all, facing such a formidable competitor, gaining the child's affection first would make winning over the mother twice as effective. Xin Qi asked Dr. Zhou if he liked Min Hui. Both pretended ignorance while knowing the truth. Xin Qi tried to suppress Dr. Zhou by leveraging his role as the child's father. He lost this battle completely, but it didn't matter, he could win back from Min Hui. Heartbroken by Min Hui's relentless overtime, Xin Qi proactively offered advanced overseas project materials as bait. Min Hui took the bait, initiating intimacy. They shared a beautiful night together. A week later, the project made significant progress. Min Hui went drinking with her best friend and accidentally got drunk. Wu Li called Dr. Zhou to pick her up. Dr. Zhou escorted the tipsy Min Hui home. Xin Qi walked in on them in a tender moment. Back home, after Min Hui forcefully kissed him, Xin Qi's heart raced. He couldn't stop grinning even while showering. His assistant, seeing his beaming face, assumed the company stock had soared. When Min Hui sobered up, she remembered the ridiculous things she did last night and wished she could vanish into a hole. Xin Qi thoughtfully prepared honey water to help her sober up. He announced he'd decided to invest in Min Hui's new project, even extending the development timeline by 6 months. She confidently insisted it wasn't necessary, only to hear Xin Qi say he demanded absolute certainty not just for the project, but for the people involved. Xin Qi's concern made Min Hui feel genuinely happy. Yet the next moment, she was mortified with embarrassment. Xin Qi advised her to cut back on drinking given her poor tolerance. After wrapping up work smoothly, Minhui decided to take a day off of oneself and take Xiaoming out for some fun. They tried every attraction at the amusement park. The family of three enjoyed a blissful day together. On their way home, they ran into Dr. Zhou downstairs. He had come specifically to deliver shoes for Min Hui. He also reminded Xiaoming to visit his office later for a heart rate check. Xin Shi knew exactly what he was up to and immediately declined the offer. His son already had a dedicated family doctor. Fearing Dr. Zhou might steal his wife away, Xin Shi urged his son to tell Min Hui to hurry home. The high heels Dr. Zhou gave were stunning, and Min Hui loved them. This infuriated Xin Shi. So the next day he went to the mall and picked out a pair of trendy women's shoes. When presenting them to Min Hui, he pretended they were from a friend. Min Hui didn't believe a friend would gift him women's shoes, but she didn't bother calling him out. Xin Shi knelt down to help Min Hui put on the shoes he bought. Their unintentional intimate eye contact made Min Hui blush. She hurriedly said oneself had to go to work. On the way, she remarked how comfortable the shoes from the big boss felt. Wooly asked Min Hui if Xin Shi was pursuing her. Min Hui instinctively denied it, saying it was impossible. Perhaps no relationship between them was the best arrangement right now. The kindergarten was organizing a parent-child activity, and Xiaoming wanted Xin Shi to join. But since Xin Shi had to travel to Beijing for work the next day, Min Hui didn't mention it. Hearing that parents needed to bring pastries, Min Hui tried baking a cake at home. Having no experience with desserts, she fumbled around in the kitchen in a fluster. Xiaoming even snapped photos to share with Xin Shi. Min Hui was highly capable at work but utterly untalented in the kitchen. The scene of smoke billowing from the kitchen was spotted by Dr. Zhou. After learning the situation, Dr. Zhou decided to help her. While baking the cake together, Min Hui remarked that Xiaoming really seemed to need a father figure. Hearing this, Dr. Zhou hesitated about confessing his feelings to Min Hui. Unexpectedly, the cake was ready. Though Min Hui made a decent cake with Dr. Zhou's help, its appearance was so poor that no children came to buy it. Xiaoming couldn't help but feel disappointed. Just then, Xin Shi made a dazzling entrance. It turned out he had learned about the parent-child event, rushed to finish work overtime, and flew straight over. The cake Xin Shi made received unanimous praise from the children. Soon after, the family of three collaborated to create a special cake together. Within his own capabilities, Xin Shi filled the void of fatherly love Xiaoming had been missing. Seeing their happy scene, Dr. Zhou left alone, feeling desolate. That day, Xin Shi and Min Hui shared a moment of intimacy in the office. Xin Shi gazed at his girlfriend's lips, about to kiss her, but the next second, a security guard appeared, interrupting his impulse. Min Hui had no choice but to go home with Xin Shi, watching his assistant being tormented by his son until he looked like a wreck. Xin Shi found it utterly hilarious. He made up a story, telling the boy the medicine was energy pills. Xiaoming reluctantly played along and swallowed them. Then father and son started binge-watching a drama. Xin Shi pointed at the male lead and asked his son, "Is he more handsome than me?" Min Hui's new project needed a special heart disease case, preferably congenital. The most suitable case was right beside her, yet she asked Dr. Zhou to find one. Xin Shi didn't want her getting too close to Dr. Zhou, so he proactively handed over his medical records. He urged Min Hui to get some rest. Min Hui was deeply touched by this. The next day, they went to the hospital for a checkup. Xin Shi was changing into his hospital gown when Min Hui bumped into him. During the CT scan, Min Hui took Xin Shi's hand and passed her energy to him. She reassured Xin Shi not to be afraid, that he wasn't alone. Afterward, they ran into Dr. Zhou. The rivals met and instantly disliked each other. Whenever Min Hui spoke with Dr. Zhou, Xin Shi felt uneasy all over. After waiting a long time with no sign of Min Hui, he grew restless. When he went out to look for her, he accidentally overheard gossip about his rival. A pretty girl had confessed to Dr. Zhou, but he had coldly rejected her. Dr. Zhou discovered Xin Shi eavesdropping and made no secret of his liking for Min Hui. One for oneself, he'd liked her from the very first moment they met 4 years ago. Xin Shi returned to the ward to find his girlfriend already asleep. The chocolates on the table were clearly bought for him. In that moment, he admitted his heart had skipped a beat. He adjusted Min Hui's sleeping position to make her more comfortable. Seeing Min Hui sneakily open her eyes, he didn't call her out. Instead, he turned to fetch a blanket and covered her, then sat quietly beside her. To thank Xin Shi for his assistance with his work, Min Hui decided to treat him to a fancy dinner. He eagerly changed into a sharp suit, only to find they were going for a hot pot. Xin had also prepared a special gift for Min Hui. Opening it revealed 100 lipsticks in the exact same shade coincidentally. All her favorites. Min Hui asked Xin how he knew her lipstick shade. It turned out to be from the previous incident when Min Hui accidentally smudged lipstick on Xin's shirt. They shared a knowing smile without words. After dinner, Min Hui and Xiao Ming walked out of the restaurant together, but in the brief time she stepped away to take a call. Xiao Ming vanished. They urgently asked the waitstaff, who claimed not to have seen him. Helpless, they split up to search. Xin and Min Hui showed Xiao Ming's photo to passers-by nearby, but everyone claimed not to have seen him. Min Hui felt dizzy with panic, suddenly spotting a boy. She dashed forward and embraced him. Only upon seeing his face did she realize she'd mistaken him for her son. The boy's mother even mistook her for a kidnapper. Just as Xin was about to call the police, Min Hui's phone rang. Following a kind stranger's tip, they finally found Xiao Ming. Seeing the mother and son weeping in each other's arms, Xin hurried to comfort them. After putting her son to sleep, Min Hui sat down with Xin for another heart-to-heart. She couldn't imagine what she would have done if they hadn't found her son. She blamed herself for not keeping a closer eye on Xiao Ming. Xin reassured her, "You did everything you could." Seeing Xiao Ming grow increasingly dependent on Xin, Min Hui understood that a father's role was irreplaceable. They decided to let go of the past and give their son a complete family. The next day, Min Hui spotted the shirt with the lipstick stain, hung by Xin beside the bed like a treasured keepsake. A quiet smile touched her lips. She arrived at Xin's place bearing carefully chosen gifts, only to find a custody petition on the table. The moment she saw her own name, her heart felt like it was being sliced open. She recalled Xin's earlier promise to never leave Xiao Ming. She realized all the happiness she thought she had experienced was just a charade. When Xin returned to the office, he encountered an enraged Min Hui. Her demand to get out made him realize the lawsuit had been exposed. Though the lawsuit was drafted by the chairman and not his own intention, it had indeed been instigated because of him. In a fit of rage, Min Hui packed up all of Xin's belongings and threw them out. No matter how he tried to explain, Min Hui was convinced he had ulterior motives. Yet she lied to Xiao Ming, telling him his father was on a business trip. But children are sharp. Seeing his father's toiletries gone from the bathroom, he wondered if his father had abandoned him. Xiao Ming insisted on calling Xin to demand answers. Min Hui's eyes burned with fury. Seeing her son in such pain tore at her heart. In that moment, she regretted ever letting Xiao Ming acknowledge his father. Xin also spent the night sleepless, sitting alone in the large villa without eating or drinking. Nothing seemed right to him. It was nowhere near as comfortable as living in Min Hui's small apartment. That day, he also learned from a close friend that Min Hui had fallen ill. Worried, he rushed to Min Hui's home. In the elevator, he encountered Dr. Zhou. The two engaged in another heated argument. Unexpectedly, when Min Hui opened the door, she only invited Dr. Zhou inside. Since courts typically award custody to the parent with the more stable family environment, Dr. Zhou proposed a sham marriage to Min Hui oneself to divorce after securing custody of the child. But Min Hui flatly refused. Both could only cover their awkwardness with forced laughter. Xin, unable to see his son, vented his rage on his assistant. Suddenly, his son called. He snatched the phone, desperate to ease his longing. Min Hui had to travel to Shanghai for work. She decided to bring her son along for a change of scenery. Unexpectedly, as soon as they boarded the plane, a flight attendant rushed over to ask if Xiao Ming had undergone heart surgery. Min Hui felt a twinge of suspicion. These doubts were confirmed upon arriving at the hotel. The hotel manager informed her she was the hotel's 888th guest. The system had automatically upgraded their room to a luxury suite. Upon entering, she recognized the decor and guessed it was Xin's handiwork. Refusing to accept something not belonging to oneself, she asked the manager to switch them back to their original booking. Xin rushed to the hotel but found no trace of the mother and son, leaving him disappointed. Min Hui's rejection of his kindness was expected. Spotting the pair playing in the lobby, Xin started toward them. Suddenly, a woman rushed over and planted a kiss on him. Min Hui felt awkward witnessing this scene. That evening, the four dined together, nearly causing an awkward moment. Xin's sister, who had lived abroad for years, often struggled to express herself clearly. During the meal, she recounted numerous embarrassing childhood stories about Xin. making Min Hui chuckle uncontrollably. Xin Mimi adored her nephew Xiao Ming and gifted him a smart kid watch. Midway through the meal, Min Hui accompanied her to the restroom. Xin Mimi sighed, remarking how exhausting it must have been for Min Hui to care for a child with heart disease alone for 4 years. They promised to take good care of Xiao Ming from now on. It turned out Xin Mimi's true purpose for coming was to take Xiao Ming away. Disappointed, Min Hui pulled Xiao Ming away. Their relationship had just begun to mend, but now the misunderstanding had escalated again. Xin asked his sister what she'd said to Min Hui to make her so furious. Xin Mimi replied, "Know your enemy and know yourself, and you will never be defeated in 100 battles." Xin was utterly speechless. Min Hui already saw him as an enemy. Now she surely believed she harbored no regrets, though he did have impure intentions. Xin Mimi apologized for the previous lawsuit. Then she offered her brother a perfect solution. Only by marrying can you both co-parent Xiao Ming. Xin hadn't entirely dismissed reconciling with Min Hui, but he doubted Min Hui could ever forgive oneself. Cut to Min Hui cautiously asking her son if he'd be willing to live with his father. Xiao Ming was all for it, but only if Mom was there too. Without Mom, he wouldn't live with Dad either. In his son's heart, Mom always came first. The boy's heartfelt confession deeply touched Min Hui. What mother wouldn't be delighted to have such a thoughtful, well-behaved son? Xin knew Min Hui harbored reservations because she feared losing Xiao Ming. To ease her worries, he drafted a new custody waiver agreement. It explicitly allowed him weekly visits with Xiao Ming. Min Hui signed it readily, unaware this was Xin's scheme. This time, he wanted not only his son, but also her. Xiao Ming had been pestering to go camping. Min Hui finally found time to take him, only to unexpectedly run into Xin. She realized this was a plan hatched by her son and Xin. The trio pitched a tent together, playing in the sand and having a wonderful time. Wasn't this what a happy life looked like? Min Hui thought to herself that as long as Xin didn't fight her for their son, she still liked him. By the time they returned to the hotel, Xiao Ming had already fallen asleep. Min Hui was called away by a phone call from her best friend. When she returned to pick up her son for bedtime, father and son were engrossed in play. Xin was helping Xiao Ming save the Earth. Iron Man vs. Godzilla. Xiao Ming was reluctant to leave, still wanting more. Min Hui had no choice but to wait there while he pulled out his laptop to work on his own work. Before she knew it, she drifted off. Xin gazed tenderly at Min Hui's sleeping face. He gently brushed the stray hair from her ear, his eyes brimming with affection. Then he carried Min Hui to the large bed to rest. Unexpectedly, Min Hui suddenly woke up. Their eyes met, the air thick with a suggestive tension. As Xin leaned in for a kiss, their son suddenly rolled over, fearing the child. He let Min Hui sleep there and booked another room. After he left, Min Hui couldn't help but smile. This unexpected turn began to draw two separated hearts closer. Using two dolls to represent oneself and Min Hui, Xin expressed his long overdue apology and 5 years of longing. He thanked Min Hui for bearing and raising their son alone. He vowed never to waste another moment with Min Hui. Moved to tears by Xin's heartfelt words, Min Hui easily forgave the pain she had caused oneself, seeing it as a test of their love from the heavens. Just as Xin placed the promise bracelet on Min Hui's wrist, ready to solemnly say "I love you," Chen Jun burst in, furious, accusing Min Hui of being responsible for his sister Su Tian's death. He claimed Su Tian could have exited the vehicle first, but an argument with Min Hui led to Min Hui pushing her, causing her to miss her chance at survival. Min Hui stammered, unsure how to explain. She never expected Xin to doubt her too. Min Hui stared at Xin in disbelief. The man before her had just spoken heartfelt words to her. Now, in an instant, he joined others in questioning her. The events of 5 years ago seemed to replay before her eyes. Anything related to Su Tian caused Xin to lose all reason, trusting her not at all. Just then, her best friend arrived. Min Hui didn't want to explain further. If they felt unsatisfied, let them sue her in court. Wu Li berated Xin relentlessly, still feeling indignant for Min Hui. How could she fall in love time and again with someone who didn't trust her? If it wasn't 100% trust, then it wasn't worth it at all. Wu Li harbored deep resentment toward both of them. This farce made Min Hui fully realize that Su Tian was the thorn standing between her and Xin. She resolved to prove her innocence, regardless of the investigation's outcome. She'd recount Su Tian's dying words verbatim. The trio reached their destination and rested briefly. That night, Chen Jun asked Xinchi what he'd do if Minhui was proven responsible for Su Tian's death. Overhearing this, Minhui lost all hope in Xinchi. They located a witness to the original car accident. The old man recounted the crash in full detail. The bus suddenly lost control, and passengers panicked. Su Tian could have gotten off then, but she missed her best chance to escape by trying to retrieve a photo. Minhui, however, narrowly escaped death. Later, Chen Jun apologized to Minhui. He never imagined that his long-lost self would meet such a sudden end. Minhui empathized deeply. If you wish, you can consider me your sister. Not far away. Xinchi watched the two reconcile, a smile spreading across his face. He remained unaware that Minhui intended to sever all ties with him. Mutual trust is the cornerstone of any relationship. Yet Xinchi constantly doubted Minhui. After weeping bitterly, Minhui finally resolved to cut him out of her life completely. After the truth about Su Tian's death came to light, Xinchi thought everyone would be happy. Minhui was utterly disappointed in him, not even wanting to tell himself that he was leaving. Xinchi and Chen Jun returned to the orphanage where they had once lived. Walking, they reminisced about things related to Su Tian. Suddenly, Chen Jun asked Xinchi if he hadn't mistaken Minhui for Su Tian back then, would he still have fallen in love with her? The director warmly welcomed their arrival and expressed deep gratitude for Xinchi's years of support to the orphanage. During their conversation, Xinchi learned that a girl had just come looking specifically for information about Su Tian. Certain it must be Minhui, Xinchi immediately rushed out to find her. Just like 5 years ago, he found Minhui beneath the very tree where they first met. The scene remained unchanged, yet their hearts were worlds apart. Xinchi confessed his feelings to Minhui once more, but she did not accept him, because their story had already ended 5 years ago. Though she was indeed moved by Xinchi's words and had considered starting over, Su Tian's death had dealt her another crushing blow. Now, they would simply be Xiaoming's father and mother. Beyond that, they would have no further connection. After returning home, Minhui bought her son a pink backpack to give to a kindergarten classmate. She didn't notice her son had already moved on to a new girlfriend. Xinchi embarked on another long journey to win her back, constantly sending Minhui messages of greeting but receiving no replies. So the next morning, he waited outside Minhui's company like a hunter lying in ambush. The result? Minhui treated him with the cold indifference of autumn winds sweeping fallen leaves. He tried every possible method to ease the tension between them. His assistant, witnessing this, shared a love conquest guidebook with him. Xinchi shamelessly showed up at Minhui's place for a free meal. In front of her son, she couldn't really say much. Xinchi enthusiastically invited the boy to the movies. He even gave Xiaoming a knowing look, hinting he should ask his mom to come along. But just as the boy climbed into the sports car, Minhui declared that it was none of her business and that she wasn't going. She then left the father and son behind, driving off with a flourish, while Xinchi patiently taught the boy to swim. Minhui gazed elsewhere and a handsome man was swimming nearby. Xinchi decided to showcase his alpha charm, challenging the man to a race. They swam neck and neck. Minhui and her son couldn't help but nervously cheer Xinchi on. Seeing Xinchi reach the shore first, she happily clapped. But unexpectedly, on the return lap, Xinchi suffered a heart attack. Minhui panicked and jumped into the pool. Swimming to the CEO's side, she asked about his condition with concern, then leaned into his embrace. Hearing his heart pounding like a drum, she worried it was beating too fast. Xinchi explained it wasn't a physical issue, he simply couldn't control himself with such beauty in his arms. Minhui turned away awkwardly and swam back to shore, ignoring Xinchi. To win Minhui back, Xinchi began showering her with flowers as a declaration of love. However, Minhui was allergic to pollen and had planned to have her assistant discard them all. But as colleagues cast envious glances, she had them line up to take the flowers home. After arranging everything, Xinchi went to visit Minhui at her company. Only then did he realize that his heartfelt affection had been wasted on someone else. Minhui hadn't kept a single flower for oneself. When he saw Minhui, she was in a meeting. As the company's biggest investor, who dared refuse him? Xinchi kept his eyes on Minhui, agreeing with everything she said. Seeing Minhui and her best friend high-fiving, Xinchi gave a thumbs up too. But then they each picked up their coffee and started drinking. After enduring repeated rejections, Xinchi desperately needed emotional security, so he shamelessly moved back into Minhui's home, again using his son as an excuse. Minhui tried to kick Xinchi out, but her son sided completely with his father. The two colluded, playing the victim card together. Min Hui saw right through their little scheme. Though Xin solemnly apologized for his past mistakes and vowed to change, she still couldn't bear sharing a roof with him. Since she couldn't drive Xin away, she decided to leave alone. Min Hui confided her troubles to her best friend. They complained about their boyfriend's inability to comfort them, wondering why relationships couldn't run like a pre-programmed system. Later in their chat, Min Hui started numbing herself, that is, her own self, with work. She feared falling into Min Hui's diversion tactic and hesitated to chase after her. His son reminded him that Min Hui might be at her best friend's place or at Dr. Zhou's. Hearing this, Xin panicked immediately. The next day, sporting dark circles under his eyes, he went to find Min Hui. He tentatively asked if she'd gone to Dr. Zhou's. Min Hui heard but offered no explanation, letting him stew in his misunderstanding. Unexpectedly, Wu Li suddenly delivered her forgotten phone. Only then did Xin realize that it was his own fault. Learning that Min Hui hadn't stayed at his rival's place the night before, Xin burst into a silly grin, but his joy was premature. Her best friend planned to take Min Hui on a blind date. To stop Min Hui, Xin waited on her way home. The moment Min Hui appeared, he started feigning illness and playing the victim. Just as Min Hui was about to call emergency services, her son received a signal from his dad. Xiaoming demanded to know if mom was going to perform mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Only then did Min Hui realize that she'd been tricked by Xin once again, and she was determined to teach him a lesson this time. She deliberately pinched Xin's nose until he couldn't hold his breath any longer and revealed his true colors. After sitting up, Xin continued feigning weakness. Min Hui was utterly speechless. She grabbed her son and left without looking back. To prevent Xin from lingering, Min Hui changed the door code. She warned her son never to open the door for his father, threatening to kick him out too if he disobeyed. Xiaoming dared not disobey. Before closing the door, he handed Xin some chocolate, claiming it was from Min Hui. Xin narcissistically assumed Min Hui cared about him. The next day, Min Hui still had to go on the blind date. Xiaoming wanted to help his dad stop his mom. First, he built a wall with toys. Then he lied about having a stomachache. Only when he heard Min Hui was taking him to the hospital for a shot did he crawl out of bed and admit he was faking it. Knowing her son's feelings, Min Hui decided to bring him along. If he didn't like the other person, that was fine. Unexpectedly, the match was well off, handsome, and didn't mind Min Hui being a single mother. They both made a great first impression on each other. Hiding in the shadows, Xin watched them chatting happily and felt a deep sense of crisis. So he and his son worked together to sabotage the date. Xiaoming deliberately threw toys around to provoke the man, but he was surprisingly generous. Then Xin purposely called Min Hui to cause trouble. When Min Hui caught her, she stormed over and scooped up the boy. Seeing this, the man made an excuse and quickly left. Min Hui thought Xin's behavior was childish. Loving someone doesn't give you license to act however you want. Xin admitted that his jealousy was the reason, and declared that he would never give up. Min Hui could only urge him to accept reality. They couldn't go back. Xin felt unbearable heartache, only for Qin Jun to show up and announce he'd reconciled with his girlfriend. Failing to win back one's ex was bad enough, but seeing a friend succeed in love was even more agonizing. Not to mention Min Hui still had to go on blind dates. This time, however, the suitor was utterly repulsive. Clearly inferior to Min Hui in every way, he kept belittling her. He insisted women over 10 years his senior must have a son before marrying. Min Hui wasn't about to tolerate this and promptly mocked the man. Gu Liang happened to overhear and assumed Min Hui was desperate to find a father for her son. He shamelessly offered to keep her as his mistress. Seeing Min Hui ignore him, Xin resorted to his old trick again. He claimed he'd twisted his wrist while beating Gu Liang. Min Hui immediately checked his injury with concern, then realized she'd fallen for it again. But as soon as they returned to the villa, they encountered the assistant who shouldn't have been there. Min Hui chuckled, not bothering to argue. Seeing Min Hui staring blankly at the small tree in the yard, the assistant quickly pledged loyalty to his boss. He declared that Big Belly had never forgotten Min Hui in 5 years and would only ever love her. Min Hui couldn't help but be moved. She wanted Min Hui to help apply medicine, and the assistant tactfully gathered his things and left. Such perceptiveness truly deserved a promotion and raise. Upon learning that Min Hui went on a blind date to avoid oneself, Xin immediately declared that he would no longer pursue Min Hui. Unexpectedly, Xin kept his word and didn't contact her for 3 consecutive days. So Min Hui handed her phone to her son for a video call. Xin told his son that he was on a business trip in Shanghai and would return soon. But when Min Hui answered, he stammered and hung up hastily. Sensing something was wrong, Min Hui called back only to find Xin already lying in a hospital bed. It turned out he'd suffered a heart attack but tried to hide it from her. Fearing her son might lose his father at such a young age, Min Hui rushed to the hospital to care for him. That night, her son drew little hearts on the back of his hand, saying now he'd have 2 hearts. If one feels bad, the other can take over. His son's innocent words warmed his heart. Just then, a nurse entered for rounds and asked Min Hui if she was Xin's family member. Hearing her admit it, Xin blurted out, "If only I could stay sick a few more days. Having family around feels so great." As Xin obediently took his medicine, his sister burst in, rushing to ask about his condition. Unexpectedly, he scolded her for interrupting his fun. Seeing he was taken care of, Min Hui left with her son. Mimi scolded him for being ungrateful before getting down to business. Min Hui's company was up for sale. Xin immediately declared he'd buy it, that way he could see his wife every day. To expedite matters, Xin asked his sister to help him check himself out of the hospital. This time, Mimi saw through his scheme. She deliberately summoned Min Hui, falsely claiming she was too busy to care for Xin herself. Before Min Hui could refuse, her son eagerly agreed on oneself. Left with no choice, she moved into Xin's spacious villa to help his CEO father win back his wife. Xiaoming specially asked Min Hui to prepare a heartfelt sandwich. Xin took a bite full of anticipation, only to find it so awful he nearly vomited. That evening, when Min Hui brought water for Xin to take his medicine, Xin claimed he missed his own self even though Min Hui was right there in the living room. But Min Hui remained unmoved, stating she'd be heading home with her son soon. Hearing this, Xin cursed himself, muttering he might never wake up from his next nap. Min Hui warned him not to push his luck. There were limits to playing the victim. In the critical moment, it was up to the son to step in. Seeing the identical, aggrieved expressions on both father and son, Min Hui reluctantly agreed to stay. But Xin's lies had frightened young Xiaoming. Heartbroken, he asked Xin if he really would fall asleep and never wake up. Xin promised that it was not his intention. He hadn't yet seen Min Hui grow old or watched Xiaoming grow up. He warned his son not to copy his sick act to scare Min Hui. The next day after Min Hui got off work, Xin caught a whiff of another woman's perfume on her. Only after confirming it was his sister's scent did he relax. He promptly brought out a basket of men's colognes and told Min Hui to pick one to wear. That way, anyone who caught a whiff would know she was taken. Min Hui ignored him, so he prepared a romantic surprise instead. Under the starlit rooftop, Xin told Min Hui not to overthink things. He assured her he'd handle matters at her company. Min Hui declared he was like a savior sent from heaven, facing the boss who had sexually harassed oneself 5 years prior. Min Hui struck without mercy. After knocking Gu Liang down, Xin rushed over, comforting the traumatized Min Hui with a hug. Once calmed, Min Hui recounted that painful memory. Fresh out of college, she joined Guanqiu only to be summoned to Gu Liang's office and forcibly molested by the villain. She slapped him and fled the room. Later, when she reported it to the company, witnesses framed her instead. This led to scandalous rumors and her dismissal. She never imagined Gu Liang would still be after her 5 years later. The CEO would never let his own woman be bullied. He swore he wouldn't let that villain off the hook. Thus, Xin went to the hospital to confront Gu Liang. She warned him that if he harmed Min Hui again, she would ensure that he never recovered, and that would include oneself. Min Hui, standing outside the door, overheard Xin's words and was deeply moved. Her assistant couldn't help but marvel that the boss had finally made it. Min Hui had finally found a man worthy of entrusting her life to. She took out the bracelet that symbolized their bond and asked Xin if he was still willing to put it on her wrist. Xin was, of course, more than willing. In that moment, they confirmed their feelings for each other. Spark turned to flame instantly. The rest of the scene, I've watched it for you all, wasn't particularly thrilling. The next morning, they woke to find their son standing angrily by the bed. Xin could only hug his son and comfort him. He then got up first to prepare breakfast for his wife and son. Seeing Min Hui glowing, he teased her, saying love truly made a difference. During breakfast, Xin suggested that the mother and son move into the villa. The family of 3 would live happily together. But Min Hui wasn't too keen on the idea. To take control of oneself, her best friend teamed up with her boss and Min Hui to plan a management buyout. However, they still needed to find suitable investors. While Min Hui was fretting over this, she kept dropping hints. She finally realized the money god was sitting right beside oneself. She generously offered to invest 500 million. Min Hui thought it was too much, but she told her not to feel pressured. He'd charge interest on the loan, after all. When the two returned to their room and were about to get intimate, they found their son asleep on the bed. To avoid having their fun interrupted, she decided to carry him to another room. Unexpectedly, the boy suddenly woke up. The two tried to coax him back to sleep, but he refused, complaining that she had abandoned him now that he had a wife. She insisted on leaving with his son, urging him to understand his father. Xiaoming couldn't help but sigh. Adults these days are so unreliable. She returned to find Min Hui asleep. The next moment, he was tackled to the bed. This part of the plot was a bit dull, so I skipped it. Xiaoming gave his mother a necklace. She immediately asked about his own gift. Xiaoming told him to close his eyes, then pulled out a matching smartwatch of oneself. She didn't find it childish at all. He happily wore it, even keeping it on during meetings. So one day, the office suddenly echoed with a dog's bark. After the contract was signed smoothly, she immediately dragged Min Hui to a secluded corner. He couldn't wait to claim his reward. Min Hui quickly planted a kiss on him, saying this was the interest, the rest would come later that night at home. The domineering CEO now grinned like a puppy. To get the money faster, Min Hui decided to sell the house she shared with oneself and her son. At first, she objected Min Hui could just ask him for money, but then he realized that once her house sold, she'd have to move in with him and her son. So he enthusiastically agreed. He immediately contacted a real estate agent to view properties. While packing, Min Hui felt deeply reluctant. After all, she had saved every penny to buy this place. She had once believed it would be a safe haven for her and her son. Now that it was being sold, she suddenly felt an emptiness in her heart. But a house isn't a home. Now she had her son and Just then, Dr. Zhou arrived. Immediately asserted his dominance. Dr. Zhou was provoked by Xi's smug attitude. He pointed out that Xi was so wealthy, why did he need Min Hui to sell her house? Dr. Zhou mentioned a friend urgently seeking a home. After viewing Min Hui's place, the buyer was highly satisfied, agreeing to close the deal in 3 days. Min Hui didn't know the buyer was a front arranged by Xi and Dr. Zhou. The property would eventually be transferred under Xiaoming's name. Xi unexpectedly spotted Min Hui with a man at the bookstore. He instantly recalled picking her up from work 2 days prior. Wu Li suddenly wanted to tease him, deliberately shouting for Min Hui to call Kai Bao. He even complimented the man on his youth and good looks, mentioning they'd been set up on a blind date before. This investment, he claimed, was also done for Min Hui's sake. Xi sneaked behind the two, unsurprisingly spotted by Min Hui. He awkwardly explained he was just buying toys for his son. To his surprise, Min Hui pulled him straight over to meet Kai Bao. She introduced Xi as her boyfriend. Min Hui's actions gave Xi immense security. Xi was more thrilled than signing a billion-dollar contract on his own. He grabbed Min Hui's face and planted a smacking kiss on it. But happy days are always short-lived. As soon as they got home, they were intercepted by colleague Hu Pan. Hu Pan produced a bugging device. It turned out Ding Feng had threatened her to steal Min Hui's company's bidding price. She pretended to agree, then rushed over after work to tell Min Hui everything. Min Hui and Xi guessed Gu Liang was behind it and decided to turn the tables. Since he wanted to win so badly, they'd let him lose completely. Min Hui was devastated after his company was acquired by their arch-rival. Fortunately, Xi and their son were there to cheer her up. Xi reassured Min Hui not to worry, promising he'd always be her rock. Moved, Min Hui clasped Xi's large hand. By the time she stepped out of the car, she felt energized, but Xi called after her. As she lowered her head, he leaned out the window and kissed his beloved. Upon entering the company, Min Hui slammed her prepared resignation letter onto the desk, but Gu Liang refused to accept it, instead threatening her with the heart modeling project and her team. He warned that if she dared to leave, the project would be halted immediately and all developers fired. Min Hui hadn't expected Gu Liang to be so shameless. She had no choice but to bow to reality. Her assistant asked Xi why he didn't recruit Min Hui into his own company. That way, he could protect her while letting her fully utilize her talents. Xi's answer surprised him. Min Hui isn't the kind of woman who needs a man's protection. She has her own abilities, ideas, and methods. I believe she can handle it. But Xin certainly wouldn't let Min Hui be bullied. Gu Liang always harassed Min Hui when she was leaving work. This time, he even tried to force her into his car. Fortunately, Xin arrived in time to stop him. Afterward, Xin took Min Hui to rest at a nearby convenience store. Only then did Min Hui notice a scrape on his arm. Heartbroken, she urged him not to push himself too hard. Min Hui insisted that, for oneself, one didn't need a man's protection. Unexpectedly, Xin replied, "Whether you need my protection is your choice. Protecting you is my responsibility." As Min Hui lifted Xin's handsome face to reward him with a kiss, his phone suddenly rang. It turned out that Ding Feng had just tried to assault Hu Pan. The two had kindly escorted her home. Min Hui urged her to report it to the police. She shared that, 5 years ago, she had experienced a similar ordeal and that constant compromise had never solved the problem. Some people only grow more demanding the more you indulge them. Yet Hu Pan still feared potential rumors. On their way home, Min Hui and Xin discussed the challenges working women face. She hadn't expected the lofty CEO to understand these struggles. The next day, Hu Pan mustered the courage to report the incident. Ding Feng finally received his just punishment. Min Hui announced that all colleagues would henceforth have freedom of dress. Facing workplace discrimination and harassment, one must bravely refuse. Xin secretly took Dr. Zhou to pick out an engagement ring. Wanting to surprise Min Hui, Dr. Zhou, not to be outdone, showed Xin a sweet photo of oneself and one's girlfriend. Unexpectedly, Xin remarked that the girl wasn't as pretty as Min Hui. Dr. Zhou, speechless, suggested he visit the ophthalmology department during his next hospital checkup. Xin witnessed his beloved woman being knocked 40 meters away. He vowed to make the perpetrator pay dearly. Both knew this wasn't a simple accident, it was Gu Liang's meticulously planned conspiracy. But in truth, Xin had already been secretly laying his own plans. Once Min Hui's foot injury had healed somewhat, Xin pushed her to meet a mysterious figure. It turned out that after Gu Liang and Lin Shi broke up, Gu Liang feared that she possessed incriminating evidence against himself. He sent men to ransack his home, yet failed to find what he sought. Lin Shi returned to find her apartment in shambles and suspected it was Gu Liang's doing. She tried to flee, but it was too late. Xin intervened, offering her a safe haven on the condition she collaborate to bring down Gu Liang. Unexpectedly, Lin Shi refused. The moment Lin Shi accepted the room key, her resolve wavered. If Gu Liang showed no mercy, she wouldn't be held accountable for oneself. She anonymously exposed Gu Liang's sexual harassment of female subordinates online. When she met Min Hui, she presented evidence of the incident from 5 years ago. Reflecting on recent events, Min Hui realized that if she chose to remain silent, Gu Liang would escalate. So she joined Lin Shi in a live stream, exposing the scum Gu Liang's unspeakable deeds to the world. The incident sparked heated online debate. Everyone sided with justice. Gu Liang was utterly disgraced. Soon, he was arrested by the police. The villain finally received his just punishment. But Xi's revenge wasn't over. He decided to acquire Gu Liang's company. Min Hui was deeply moved by how much Xi had accomplished for oneself in such a short time. Xi had promised not to let Min Hui suffer even the slightest injustice. He sought out Gu Liang's wife, hoping she would sell her 5% stake. She initially refused, but when Min Hui revealed how Gu Liang had deliberately killed her beloved dog, the wife immediately agreed to the CEO's proposal. Lin Shi finally offered Min Hui his long overdue apology. With this, everything was finally settled. Yet after days of relentless exertion, Xi's fragile heart could bear no more strain. That evening, he took out the prepared ring, intending to formally propose to Min Hui. Tears welled in Min Hui's eyes. Unexpectedly, when he asked, "Will you marry me?" an accident occurred. She asked Xin what he had wanted to say before fainting. If he'd spoken up, she might have been in a good mood and said yes. But Xin, fearing that his own time was short, kept silent about the proposal. Min Hui privately sought out Dr. Zhou to inquire about Xin's condition. Dr. Zhou explained that Xin's recent overwork had triggered complications. The chief physician had warned him during a previous checkup. Now, Xin must undergo surgery in the United States or risk life-threatening consequences. Not wanting to worry Min Hui, Xin deliberately lied the next day, claiming that he, oneself, was completely recovered. He said he was only going abroad tomorrow for a business meeting. Min Hui smiled and agreed. They decided to spend this beautiful day together. On the Ferris wheel, Xin promised Min Hui that he would return healthy and whole. Why was fate so cruel? Happiness was within reach, yet it tormented this loving couple. Min Hui told Xin herself that she had prepared a surprise for him. She asked Xin to count to 5 before removing the blindfold, but the scene before him left him speechless. In the video, Min Hui boldly declared her feelings, whether 5 years ago or now. "You are the only one I want to marry. If you're willing, please turn around." Min Hui stood before Xin in a white cocktail dress, holding a diamond ring. The proposal had been stolen by her. Min Hui slipped the ring onto Xin's finger herself, but when it was his turn, he hesitated. Xin made Min Hui promise to believe he would return to place the ring on her finger. Min Hui vowed she would wait forever. Then they kissed passionately. That night, the family of 3 lay in bed. Min Hui regretted wasting so much time with Xin. If only she'd known, she should have held him tight the moment they reunited. The next morning, Min Hui awoke to find Xin gone. Rushing to the living room, she found only a signed will on the table. Min Hui dialed Xin's number. Xin's voice came through. "If I return, this is just part of what I'll give you too. If I don't come back, this is everything for you." Tears streamed down Min Hui's face. During Xin's absence, she threw herself into her career. Even the occasional news from him brought her lasting joy. Half a year later, Wu Li took Min Hui to meet a mysterious client. The elevator malfunctioned. Min Hui ended up on the top floor and heard her son's voice. Following his clues, she made her way to the rooftop but found no one there. Just as she was about to leave, a long-missed voice suddenly called out from behind. She turned to find oneself, the boyfriend who had vanished for half a year. Xin was finally back. Min Hui could scarcely believe her eyes. The next moment, they rushed toward each other. The two lovers were reunited at last. Some say a proposal is a long-planned romance. Those who love you will give their all. Xin and oneself held a grand wedding on the lawn. Their son served as their little officiant. Xiaoming tried to continue reading the vows, but many words were unfamiliar to him, so Dad had to step in and recite the promises himself. Xin kept his word. He finally slipped the ring symbolizing their marriage onto Min Hui's finger. From this day forward, they would be each other's closest lovers. When Min Hui tossed the bouquet, Chen Jun and her best friend made a bet that if he himself caught it, she'd marry him. His wish came true, and soon another newlywed couple emerged. All 3 couples headed to the seaside for their honeymoons. Each had found his own happiness. Xin took Min Hui to see the wishing tree, laden with tokens of his love for her. But his greatest wish was to explore every corner of the world with Min Hui. Min Hui, of course, agreed. 2 years later, Xin and Min Hui welcomed their second child. The family of 4 returned to the tree where they first met. Xiaoming insisted on pointing at his baby brother in the stroller and calling him a sister. No matter how Min Hui corrected him, he wouldn't budge. Xin, however, thought having another little sister would be quite nice, and so, the family lived on, full of shameless fun.